Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Saskatchewan RCMP are renewing their calls for tips regarding a fatal hit and run that happened in the Red Earth First Nation last February. On February 12th, early Monday morning at around 4:30 a.m., Carrot River RCMP responded to an injured person on Highway 163 in Red Earth First Nation. 31-year-old Erickson Bear was located and pronounced dead. Officers later determined he was struck by a vehicle that fled the scene. Bear was a resident from Red Earth, and RCMP are currently in the First Nation continuing their investigation this week. Red Earth is located about 220 kilometers east of Prince Albert. Anyone with information about the incident is asked to contact RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Opposition continues to grow against the Trudeau government's decision to reduce the amount of funding available to First Nations conducting searches for unmarked graves on the sites of former residential schools. Two First Nations in Northern Ontario have joined the call for the government to rescind its decision. And an online petition is also circulating asking for a reversal of the move. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story.
The government slashed funding for searches of unmarked graves from $3 million to $500,000. That decision brought dozens of protesters to Parliament Hill last month. Now two First Nations in Northern Ontario are also speaking out. Grassy Narrows First Nation Chief Rudy Turtle says the announcement has scuttled his community's plans to do a search of the grounds of the former Macintosh residential school.
And as a result, we have to reduce our team and reduce our costs, and it's just going to make it less effective. It's just not a good situation.
Lac Seul First Nation Councillor Derek Maude says they are also very disappointed.
It sets us back, obviously, especially with the operations of this thing, because it's a lot of work they're doing, and we're not even breaking ground yet to search.
Add to this an online petition calling on the government to reverse its decision, which had reached over 2,300 signatures by Friday. The federal NDP has also weighed in, sending a letter to Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anishinaabemowin demanding answers for the cuts. NDP MP Nikki Ashton says the Liberals have done nothing short of breaking an election promise.
Right now is that the Liberals actually campaigned, made it as part of their campaign commitment to invest in reconciliation and answers for communities coming out of the discoveries at Kamloops. And here we are 3 years later. We've seen an 85% cut in the funding to communities.
Turtle says the government has an obligation to provide the necessary funding for communities to conduct proper and thorough searches.
This is not the time to be doing funding cuts, especially with residential school searches. And if the federal government is serious about reconciliation, this is not the way to go about it.
And Maude hopes the government will revisit its decision, if only for the sake of survivors.
I guess they really want closure, but if the federal government's slashing funding dramatically like that, it's just like it puts a halt on this vehicle that we're driving, and it's really disheartening, to be honest.
In an emailed statement, Crown Indigenous Relations says the government provided $91 million to the Residential Schools Missing Children Community Support Fund in this year's budget. And changes to how funding is delivered represents a more sustainable approach to include as many community-led applications as possible. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Yukon government says 68 dead fish were recently found in a creek downstream of the Eagle Gold Mine near the community of Mayo. The mine is located on the traditional territory of the First Nation of Nacho-Nayakdun. In June, an equipment failure caused cyanide to be released into the surrounding environment. At a press conference today, government officials said the fish likely died due to discharge from the mine's water treatment plant, as opposed to contaminants in the surrounding environment. They say cyanide breaks down rapidly in tissues and shouldn't affect animals that eat fish carcasses. Victoria Gold, the mine's owner, has since been ordered by the Department of Oceans and Fisheries to build barriers along the creek.
The death of a large group of fish like that, of multiple species, in a really short period of time is completely consistent with what we would expect from cyanide toxicity.
Representatives for Nacho-Nayakdun say they intend to speak to the media next week. South of the Medicine Line, Vice President Kamala Harris has recently chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. According to some reports, Harris has now taken a 5-point lead in a new poll against Donald Trump in the presidential campaign. Reporter and host with Indian Country Today, Aaliyah Chavez, joins us now from Phoenix, Arizona, to talk more about the significance of this all, including what it could mean for Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, who is Anishinaabe. Leah, always great to have you with us. First off, I guess, can you talk about the significance of Kamala Harris choosing Tim Walz to run alongside her?
Of course, it's wonderful to be back. I can't understate the significance of Vice President Kamala Harris choosing Tim Walz as her running mate. It was, as a lot of people know, a huge question as to who she would pick. I mean, the vice president is literally the second in command. It's who the president trusts the most to make some really big decisions. And so when Tim Walz's name was put into the hat as to who she could choose, a lot of us thought, is it going to happen? Would it happen? And it did. Tim Walz, of course, is the governor of Minnesota. He was the first governor in Minnesota to, choose a lieutenant governor who is Anishinaabe, which of course is Peggy Flanagan from the White Earth Nation. And in addition to that, he was also the first governor in Minnesota to visit all 11 tribal nations in the state. And that is really significant. Nobody had ever done that before, but also under the Walz and Flanagan administration, there have been really big strides for Native American people, namely things like missing and murdered Indigenous women initiatives, as well as initiatives to teach the true history of Native Americans in public schools across the state.
Well, you're going to be covering a rally there later today, but what has been the reaction so far for Tim Walz?
I think it's largely been very good for the Harris-Walz campaign. People seem to be really excited about him, particularly Indigenous people. I have seen a few, tidbits that have been a little bit critical of Walz's record on a few pipelines in Minnesota. But for the most part, I've seen nothing but overwhelming support. People seem to be really, really happy about a Tim Walz pick, specifically, as I mentioned, because of his knowledge about Indian country and knowing that, with the Vice President, Tim Walz, we wouldn't have to sort of get him up to speed on Indian country issues. It seems like he already knows kind of what he's doing in that area.
Well, as you touched on it, with Walz potentially taking on a new role here, there may be an opportunity for Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we would have the first Native American woman to be the governor of any state if Peggy Flanagan becomes the governor of Minnesota. That could happen in one of two ways. One, if Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz win the presidential election in November, or two, if Governor Walz were to resign as governor in order to focus on campaigning or getting elected. That seems to be a little bit more of a rare circumstance. As we know, on the Republican ticket, former President Donald Trump has chosen a U.S. Senator, J.D. Vance, to be his running mate, and there has been almost no conversation about J.D. Vance resigning from his post. So that seems to be a little bit more of a rare, but would be historical chance if that did happen.
Yeah, just quickly here, Leah, if that were to happen, an Anishinaabe woman as governor, what do you think that would mean for Indigenous peoples in the United States?
I think it would be a big step forward. One, for having Indian country issues at the table. I mean, if you look at Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan's record so far, she is very liked by a lot of Native American people. I was actually just at an event in Arizona 2 weeks ago where Peggy Flanagan was the keynote speaker, and I was watching as she was giving her speech, and people in the audience literally had tears in their eyes while she was speaking. They gave her a standing ovation. She's one of the most well-liked Native American politicians in the United States. So I think people would be really excited about that possibility, and we'll just wait to see what the outcome of this election is.
Aaliyah, we'll leave it there. We'll be following along with your tweets from the rally today. Always great to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
Tourism Lodge in the NWT, once American-owned, is back in the hands of locals. That story and more coming up. Welcome back. More and more often, tourism is being used as an industry to help Indigenous communities showcase their culture and share their story. Our reporter Charlotte Mort Jacobs takes a look at one fishing lodge paving the way north of 60.
Under the midnight sun on the secluded shores of Lac La Marte, the fish are biting. Guests from as far away as Australia and Italy will travel here to experience the pristine wilderness. And who better to showcase it than those from here, the Klintcho people. But it wasn't always that way.
In Belgrade, this is Sonti. Sonti.
Archie Natsiza helped build the guest cabins here in the 1970s. He remembers the disconnect felt by locals seeing outsiders call the shots.
Some of the elders, they don't really like it. The Americans, they come in here and they take all the fish and they just catch it and then they throw it back in the water, and then the fish, they get sore on the neck, and then they die there. Yeah. Some of this, they seen them, if they go out on a lake, they see the fish floating.
Up until 2023, Americans owned this fishing lodge. At that point, the economic arm of the Klintcho Nation bought out the shares, making this viable tourism business 100% First Nation owned and operated. Klintcho Adventures Director of Tourism Samantha Stewart says they're diversifying their portfolio to increase employment opportunities for locals.
To see more youth get involved and create a few more positions. So cultural experiences, supervisor, tour liaisons, elder in residence is something we're trying to incorporate as well as we diversify the tourism here into extending the season into Aurora tourism and more workshops, healing programs.
I know where all the fish are. I know where all the animal moose and the woodland caribou.
Natsiza is an elder in residence here from the small Dene community of Wati, some 40 kilometers away.
We're teaching all these young guys, the one that they don't have a job or they don't go to school. So they come over here and we try to teach them how to do guiding.
Klintcho Adventures is engaging with the community by ensuring the stories behind important spots on the lake, like this old fish camp, are part of the experience.
So having Archie and Michelle out here is a great opportunity as I do more strategic planning and business planning to hear their perspectives on the land and the area and the people, and then incorporating some cultural protocols into the tourism offerings here, whether it's something small like land acknowledgements or something bigger like knowing where the animals are tracking throughout the year, how we can work with the community on things like fishing derbies and more day trips out of Wati.
Michelle Moosenose is another local elder in residence. He's excited to share stories of growing up setting nets to feed his family's dog team. He also wants to incorporate the language Klintcho Yati at the lodge.
Well, some places, islands, like, we have names for it. In Kingston, we have names, you know, like around the lake. Yeah. It has a name on it, just like across the river here from a big island. That one too, like it has a name in Dargava.
The lodge will host over 200 clients this summer. Kitchen and hospitality manager Debbie Porter is not only satiating their appetites, as an Anishinaabeg from the Second First Nation, she's taking pride in what she sees as a surge in Indigenous tourism across the country.
It makes it more interesting. It does. It makes it more interesting. And, you know, being as we get all of our people from usually the States, you know, they find that super interesting that we're telling them things, you know, from the land or from this region.
John Simpson has been guiding here since 2011.
Yeah, my grandfather worked here, my father worked here before.
What keeps you coming back?
Well, just like meeting new people, you know, from the state, that's why, and well, I want to know what's it like over there.
A man of few words, Simpson says guiding is simple. Make safety a priority and keep landing trophy fish. Charlotte Mart Jacobs, APTN National News, Lac La Marche, Northwest Territories.
Great looking place. Thanks for that, Charlotte. The world premiere of Star Wars: A New Hope in Anishinaabemowin debuted in Winnipeg last night. We'll take you to the event after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Oksana found this mushroom known as the chicken of the woods in her backyard for the first time. Thanks for sharing, Oksana. You can send your pictures to share@aptn.ca if you'd like to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 24 in Halifax, 25 with rain in Fredericton. Sun's out in 16 in Kuujjuaq, 20 for Nain. 24 in Montreal, rain, and 21 in Val-d'Or. 18 with showers in Sault Ste. Marie, 23 with rain in North Bay. Showers in 18 in Thunder Bay, rain, and 20 in Sioux Lookout. 24 and cloudy in God's Lake, 25 in Norway House. 23 in Winnipeg, Dauphin, and Brandon. Sunny and 23 for Regina. 25 under the sun in Saskatoon. 25 in Meadow Lake, Smoky, and 26 for La Ronge. Sunny across most of northern Alberta. 31 in High Level, 29 in Fort Chipewyan. 26 for Edmonton, Medicine Hat, and Lethbridge. 25 in Vancouver, 32 in Kamloops. 29 with showers in Prince George, 30 and rain for Smithers. 18 in Old Crow, 24 in Whitehorse. 24 in Yellowknife, 24 with showers in Norman Wells. 17 with rain in Sax Harbor, still 30 in Politac. 27 in Chesterfield, 29 in Baker Lake. 6 in Resolute, Smoky, and 23 in Joe Haven. Star Wars: A New Hope was recently dubbed into Anishinaabemowin, and it made its world debut at a Winnipeg concert hall last night. The event was done in a grand way from beginning to end, where the force was strong with the language and culture. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
From the moment Margaret Simmons and her family entered the venue, this language teacher beamed with pride and joy.
Look at all these people. They're going to listen to it in our language, in Ojibwe. Like, how exciting that is. My heart is just beating.
Her daughter even made ribbon skirts with Star Wars print for the big night.
I just had to create skirts. My sister's a villain, of course, and I get to be Princess Leia. But no, for real, we get to represent the good. There's a lot of teachings that correlate with our teachings, and even our ribbons inspire a message of truth, hope.
From traditional dress to full-blown costumes, many here will forever know Star Wars: New Hope as Anigung Migating. There was even a grand entry to start the night off in a good way, and Anishinaabemowin prayers. And even some good old Nish humor from Manitoba Premier Wab Canoe. In the hall, Noah Robinson shows off his lightsaber skills. He led in the dancers with his drum group earlier. After watching the Anishinaabemowin version, he shared words about his solo battle.
Would have loved to sit down and with like my own grandmother and have her like translate it for me herself rather than even reading the subtitles. So it meant a lot. It got a little emotional at one point.
Heartfelt emotions that many seem to have, including Wanda Baker, who said the language itself embodies its own heartbeat.
With the characters there, it was brought it to life, because in the language there's a lot of humor. We laugh at anything and everything.
Blake Andrekaneb is an artist who's made Anishinaabe paintings of Star Wars characters for years.
It's like the story of my life and culture, and I like taking stuff from Star Wars and infusing it with our culture. We always had this movie playing in my house as a kid, so it's I know the whole movie.
Ogimasquest Princess Leia was voiced by Teresa Aishin. Wearing a dress with Ojibwe syllabics that in English means "May the Force be with you," she shares her favorite Anegung Migating line.
I mean, my favorite was the one where, can somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way? But in the language, it's not really translated like that. But it still has the same effect. And that one is like the one I just said. Yeah.
Ava McCons was one of her students who came to support her for this premiere.
She's a great teacher. She taught me lots. She taught me lots of songs. I know a lot more of the language because of her. She taught me different dialects,
making it easy for her to follow along throughout the movie. Behind the scenes, Pat Nugwans helped with the language.
I did the initial translation of the script, and then I brought people from different dialects to come and, try to make sure that the script is understood by as many people as possible.
Something that most appreciated here, as the Anishinaabemowin language can be tricky. A sentiment Dennis Chartrand, the Ojibwe Darth Vader, shares.
It was a constant revision and adaptation, I'll say, to make sure everything fits. And as you've seen in the movie, you had all those actors making it look like they spoke Anishinaabemowin. That was so cool to see finally.
And it paid off, says Simmons, who also happens to be Chartrand's own Jedi Master of Anishinaabemowin.
Yes, we both did. We were taught in the community where he's from, so we've known him from a long, long time.
Pierre Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
What a turnout and an achievement. It'll be streaming on Disney Plus soon and coming to APTN at a later date. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Friday. For more on anything you've seen here and much more, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And be sure to join us here on Saturday and Sunday for APTN National News Weekend. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuetch, thanks for joining us on this International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples Day. Have a great night.